I was on the second watch rotation when they arrived. The Meridian Shelf is not a comfortable posting. 300 kilometers above sea level, suspended in the gravitational thread between Earth's pull and the void beyond it. The shelf is not built for comfort. It is built for memory. The outer skin of the platform is surfaced in a dark composite alloy that absorbs radar and reflects almost nothing, and along the inner ring, behind 3 meters of layered shielding, the watch stations sit in a long curved row, one officer per sector, each responsible for a wedge of approach space that spans millions of kilometers. My wedge covers the ecliptic approach corridor from the direction of the Vorrkai home systems. I had studied that corridor for 11 years. I had memorized its background radiation signature, its usual traffic density of rogue ice bodies and dust clouds, its seasonal drift. I knew it the way an old sailor knows a stretch of coastline, not abstractly, but in the bone. So when the gravity wake readings spiked at 0340 station time and 22 contacts materialized at the edge of my sensor window, I did not panic. I did not reach for the emergency channel. I keyed my console to log capture, leaned forward in my harness and said, quietly and to no one in particular, "There you are. We had known they would come." That is what people outside the military tend to misunderstand when they speak of the Vorrkai's return as though it were a surprise. It was not a surprise. It was a scheduled event, one that had been anticipated for so long that anticipation had calcified into something harder, certainty. The historians can argue about the exact date the Vorrkai left Earth. The consensus sits at 60,000 years, give or take a few centuries. What is not argued is what they did before they left. They came to a world that was young and unprotected. They took what they wanted, ore, biomatter, atmospheric compounds, whole ecosystems stripped to the bedrock. They left the planet scarred and cold, with a handful of surviving human populations scattered across the wreckage, and they departed with the casual confidence of a quarry crew that had exhausted a good seam. They did not believe anything would be left worth returning to. They were wrong. But 60,000 years passed before they had occasion to learn it. In that interval, we remembered. That is the plain fact of it, and I will not dress it up. Every political system Earth built in the long centuries of recovery eventually incorporated, at some foundational level, the record of what happened. The great archives kept the accounting. The orbital defense councils were established before humanity had so much as a single warship capable of reaching the outer system. The doctrine that shaped the Meridian Shelf and its sister platforms was codified 40,000 years ago, and every generation since had added to it, refined it, trained against it, and passed it on. We did not build the shelf because some general had a vision. We built it because 40,000 years of institutional memory demanded that we be ready when the fleet that stripped our world came back. It took them about 6 hours to close the distance from their emergence point to low Earth range. 6 hours during which the shelf went to full combat alert. The warship canopy above the clouds activated and climbed to station altitude, and the planetary grid came online sector by sector, until the whole of Earth glowed on the tactical display, like something deliberate and vast and patient, which it was. I watched their formation through the long-range optics, and what I noticed first was how their ships looked old, primitive. The Vorrkai are an advanced species, and their vessels showed the engineering of a civilization with deep pockets and long practice. But there was something in the design that spoke of a certain settled confidence, a civilization that had reached a plateau and stopped reaching further. Their flagship was enormous, a dreadnought class by our designation, plated in a dark, iridescent material that shifted color in the sun. Surrounding it were 21 escorts in a close formation that had not changed since the oldest tactical records we had recovered from the pre-stripping era. They were flying in 60,000-year-old geometry. We had noticed. First indication that something was wrong, from their perspective, must have come when their long-range sensors picked up the shelf. There is no hiding a platform of this scale when it chooses to be seen, and Commander Adeyeokwu had ordered active emissions at full power the moment the contacts materialized. The shelf announced itself. 17 kilometers of layered armor, weapons arrays, sensor banks, and the quiet hum of a power plant that could run a mid-sized city for a decade. All of it pointed at the approach corridor. All of it waiting. Tracked their formation through the optics and watched them slow. Not stop, slow. There is a difference, and it told me something about their psychology. They were not the kind of species that stops in the face of the unexpected. They were the kind that slows, recalculates, and decides they have not understood the situation fully yet. I respected that. It was not enough. I respected it. Their herald signal came 40 minutes later, broadcast on a frequency that matched the oldest records we had of their communication protocols. A frequency they presumably assumed we still used because 60,000 years ago it was all we had. The translation algorithms handled it without difficulty. We had been practicing with recovered Vorrkai signal records for 200 years. The herald's message was 14 seconds long. It identified the fleet as the sovereign reach of the Vorrkai Dominion. Acting under the perpetual resource claim, the Dominion held over what it referred to as the Third Reclamation World. Catalog designation K7 Auric. It stated that the Dominion had returned to assess and resume extraction operations. It requested, and the translation here is approximate, because the Vorrkai concept has no clean equivalent in any human language, that any remaining biological populations prepare for registration and labor assignment. Commander Okwif listened to the translation twice. Then she keyed her response. She spoke for 47 seconds. I will not reproduce all of it here. The official transcript is part of the public record. But the shape of it was this. She acknowledged the Dominion's arrival. She acknowledged the historic claim. She then informed the Dominion's herald that the Third Reclamation World, known to its inhabitants as Earth, had filed its response to that claim across the preceding 60,000 years, and that the response was now visible on every sensor frequency the Dominion's fleet possessed, if they cared to look. She identified the Meridian Shelf. She identified the warship canopy, 112 vessels of the line arranged in geosynchronous arc, from pole to pole, each one a kilometer or longer. She identified the planetary grid, 416 ground-based and orbital weapons platforms, linked, active, targeted. She said that the Dominion was permitted to leave. She said that this permission had a duration of 30 minutes, and that the Dominion should not mistake permission for weakness because one was a choice, and the other was a condition that no longer applied. Then she fired one shot. The target was the rearmost escort, the ship at the trailing edge of the formation, the one with the smallest crew complement according to our hull size estimation. The Shelf's primary rail array put a single kinetic round through its drive section at a closing velocity that left no ambiguity about the result. The escort came apart in a slow, bright expansion that the long-range optics tracked for several seconds before the debris dispersed into the dark. Cast formation did not move for 4 minutes and 17 seconds. Then it turned. I sat at my console and watched them go. Watched the dreadnought and its remaining 20 escorts burn hard on a vector that would take them back out the way they had come, back through the ecliptic approach corridor, back into the deep dark from which they had emerged with 60,000 years of unchallenged confidence. I watched until they were out of sensor range. It took a long time. When the board finally cleared, I sat with my hands flat on the console and let the quiet settle around me. There is a feeling that comes after a moment like that which is difficult to name. It is not triumph, exactly, or not only triumph. It is something older and heavier. It is the feeling of a debt that has been sitting on the books for longer than any individual life can hold, finally acknowledged. The people who were stripped, who survived in the cold and the ruin, built the first councils and wrote the first doctrines, and told their children and their children's children they did not live to see this morning. None of them did. But the weight of what they built, the patience they bequeathed, the discipline they encoded into every institution that came after them, all of that was in the room with us. We did not celebrate on the shelf. That is not the culture of this posting. When the shift change came, I wrote my log entry, noted the contacts, noted the engagement, noted the withdrawal, noted the time, standard format, no embellishment. But before I sealed the entry, I added one line that is not standard. I wrote, "They came back and we were here. That is all it needed to say. That is all it had ever needed to say."